Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining this side event on the Call to Action Dedicated Financing Facility for LDCs with focus on the Bridge Facility. I'm Esther Pan-Sloan of UNCDF, and I'll be your moderator today. A very warm welcome to our distinguished panelists, speakers, and guests. The Addis Ababa Action Agenda and the 2030 Agenda both identify the need for multiple sources of finance to work together effectively and in new combinations. Yet the international financial architecture is not designed to directly support small ticket size, higher risk transactions that will be the key to achieving transformative impact at the local level, especially in the least developed countries. In this context, it is critical that the LDC5 Conference delivers concrete solutions that make finance work better for the LDCs and leave no one behind. Today, we will explore one such solution, UNCDF's Bridge Facility, which can serve as a dedicated financing mechanism to attract additional private sector resources to SDG-aligned investments in the least developed countries. So let's begin. Our first speaker is UN Undersecretary General and High Representative of the Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries, and Small Island Developing States, Courtney Rattray. Mr. Undersecretary General, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Esther. Can you hear me okay? His Excellency Mr. Perks Ligoya, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Malawi, Ms. Preeti Sinha, Executive Secretary of UNCDF, Excellencies, distinguished speakers, dear colleagues. Let me begin by thanking Preeti and UNCDF for inviting me to today's important side event organized on dedicated financing facilities for LDCs and the Bridge Facility. With the 5th UN Conference on LDCs, i.e. LDC5, set to take place in Doha next January, we are throughout the course of this week engaging in the second preparatory committee meeting. The LDC5 Conference provides the opportunity to share an effective and strengthened response to COVID-19 so as to enable LDCs to recover lost ground on the SDGs. Also to enable them to build back better by taking concrete action on the ground. So today's meeting deals with critical important challenges that many of these countries need to address and address urgently, amongst which are the access to and the availability of finance, of development finance. Prior to the pandemic, the delivery of commitments on development finance were already falling short of the promises that have been made. In fact, the 2021 report of the Secretary General on the implementation of the Program of Action for LDCs for the decade 2011 to 2020 notes that if DAC countries meet their commitment of 0.2% or at least 0.15% of their GNIs to LDCs, it would significantly increase the availability of finance in LDCs. Current available data show that ODA as well as FDI flows to the LDCs have been curtailed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Evidence from UNCDF's Blended Finance Report 2021 show that only 6% of mobilized private finance is being invested in LDCs. You know, when I read that statistic, I mean, it is such a stark representation of what is going on, of all the amount of money that has been leveraged through international public finance, and I'm talking about private capital. Only 6% of it went to these countries, while 33% went to low and middle income countries and 41% to upper middle income countries. This is particularly worrisome at a time when many LDCs are grappling with high debt levels and limited fiscal space. Agenda 2030 and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda are clear in their call for diversified forms of finance to work together in new ways to achieve sustainable development. And I think this is some of what Esther was getting to in her opening remarks. The level of ODA needs to be protected and leveraged to attract increased private capital flows to the LDCs. Both traditional development finance and blended finance instruments are needed and should work together to support LDCs in the development of a pipeline of bankable projects that can spur inclusive and sustainable development. It is unfortunate that for many LDCs, grant funding and technical assistance are simply insufficient to enable SMEs to grow. At the same time, they are often considered too small to attract private capital. And as a result, companies of this size find it difficult to make the transition to the next level and find themselves stuck in the so-called, quote unquote, missing middle. Simply put, these enterprises often do not receive the right type of financial solutions to grow. What is needed are development finance instruments tailored to meet the needs of firms at the intermediate stage of development. UNCDF offers a range of financial solutions that can address the financing challenge that this represents. Catalytic capital, including blended finance, risk mitigation instruments, guarantees, etc., can play a crucial role in this context and overall by mobilizing additional resources for the LDCs. Addressing the underlying conditions that make private investment in LDCs so challenging is equally important. And I oftentimes hear a lot about what needs to be done by others, but we, those of us that come from developing countries, also need to address what I'm referring to as the underlying conditions that make investors look at our countries and say, you know what, I don't want to take the risk of placing my capital in that environment. So I think there's a lot for us as countries to do as well. There's a need for more targeted involvement also of non-traditional actors to leverage additional resources and contribute new ideas and employ innovative financial instruments. At the joint thematic event of the General Assembly and the ECOSOC on the 18th of June this year, which was entitled Diversifying the Financing Toolbox to Enhance Investment in LDCs, the need for a comprehensive financing mechanism for LDCs to better manage risk and provide support in times of crisis was highlighted. The call for a reformed international financial system, one that can provide more effective and targeted support for LDCs, was also voiced. Indeed, the transfer of much needed external resources to these countries needs to be embedded in systemic change. Such an approach should provide financial support across the entire investment spectrum, with the goal of safeguarding livelihoods, building resilience, promoting activities in the manufacturing and services sector, and encouraging higher local value addition and technology content. Structural transformation with these features would create positive spillovers to the rest of the economy, including in terms of productivity, skills development, entrepreneurship, and employment generation. I'm particularly excited about the role that the UNCDF is playing in the financing for development architecture for the LDCs. It is making good use of its unique capital mandate. I'm pleased to be a part of this event that has been staged to promote UNCDF's bridge facility and the blended financing instruments that cater to the needs of the LDCs. We will also hear directly from the LDCs as well as the private sector. With UNCDF's on-balance sheet portfolio of loans and guarantees, the bridge facility has the tools and the mandate to serve as a dedicated financing mechanism for the LDCs. So I hope that today's session serves as a call to action to mobilize required resources for these countries. With the new program of action for the LDCs for the next decade being negotiated during the coming weeks and months, this event comes at an important time. It is vital that the LDC5 Conference deliver concrete solutions that make finance work better for the LDCs. So in closing, let me thank UNCDF for its work on developing tailored and dedicated instruments, such as blended finance, de-risking facilities, and the bridge facility, which are important contributions to this goal. I thank you for your attention, and I wish you all a productive meeting. Esther, back over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Undersecretary General. We know in your current post, as well as in your former post as Ambassador of Jamaica to the United Nations and co-leader of the Group of Friends of SDG Financing, that you have been and will continue to be a terrific champion for this cause. So we really appreciate your being with us today. Now we'll turn to Ambassador Perks Lagoya of Malawi, who heads the LDC group here at the United Nations. Ambassador Lagoya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Esther. It's a pleasure for me to be in this meeting, very important meeting at a crucial time when we are in the second PrepCom of LDC5. And I'm glad to see our USG, Courtney Rattray, Miss Pretty Senior, and all of you attending. Thank you for attending. The call to action is coming now because the phase we are going into is so crucial that we have to find solutions for financing. And financing is a cross-cutting theme across all the 6 priority areas that we have in the zero draft document. Just to remind everybody, the 6 areas are investing in people in LDCs, eradicating poverty and building capacity to leave no one behind, leveraging the power of science, technology, and innovation to fight against multidimensional vulnerabilities and to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, structural transformation as a driver of prosperity, enhancing international trade of LDCs and regional integration, addressing climate change, recovering from COVID-19 pandemic, and building resilience against future shocks, and building international solidarity, reinvigorated global partnerships, and innovative tools for risk-informed sustainable development, a march towards sustainable graduation. We all know that in the LDC4, we did not achieve most of our goals, and the analysis thereof shows that maybe we did not insist enough on the linkage between all our goals and the financing of such goals. And this is why we want to do better this time, and we have to do better this time. And so the catchword is innovative sources of financing. And I'm very glad that UNCDF is well poised to assist all our countries, LDCs, in this endeavor. And we are today talking about the build facility, but there are other facilities that UNCDF, like the Municipality Investment Fund, the local climate adaptation mechanism, all those are examples of innovative sources of financing. And I'm very thankful to the management of UNCDF. Now, I call upon all the stakeholders, especially our donor countries, to embrace this whole concept of innovative financing. And you know, the SG came up with this joint sustainable development goals fund, and the build facility is a product of that. And I'm very happy that we have somebody from Malawi who would talk to us from the ground on the experience of Malawi. Malawi is one of the few countries, together with Fiji, Indonesia, Malawi, and Uruguay, who got this lucky window, and we have the Build Malawi window, which is funding of about $9 million US, but from that, we are going to leverage up to $35 million. And this is the whole idea, that we can tap into the private sector, blended finance. And in the case of Malawi, so interesting, because we have been able to tap into domestic resources that were in the past not being used for SMEs. And I'm talking about the pension funds and insurance funds, which now are channeled into the private sector. The Malawi experience is interesting because it's in agro industry, and Malawi being a country that has agriculture as the backbone of the economy, I'm very keen to listen to Ms. Chira on the experiences that they have had. And thank you so much. I don't want to repeat everything that the USG has said, but I want to thank you, UNCDF, for this occasion. And I'm very keen to listen to our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Lagoya, also for stressing both the catalytic impact of the resources that were mobilized for Malawi, as well as the critical importance of the domestic resource mobilization of resources that are in Malawi, but have not traditionally been tapped for this type of investment. So now we'll turn to the Executive Secretary of UNCDF, Ms. Preeti Sinha. Preeti, over to you.
Thank you, Esther, and good afternoon to the USG Preparatory. Welcome to Ambassador Lagoya of Malawi, to Ambassador Yabo of the Gambia, to all other excellencies, delegates, colleagues, friends, all protocols observed. So let me start by re-emphasizing the two phrases that have been said already: the concrete deliverables that we want, the definitive outcomes that we want for LDC5. And really in January at LDC5, it will be all of us. It will be our meeting and of others. And we really want to come up with something that's good for the countries, that helps achieve the SDGs and really takes people onto the next level of development, enabling basic standards of living for all. So it's my pleasure to be here today on behalf of UNCDF to represent the goals and actions of our team here, and to really serve as a core, as a pivotal financing agency at your service, and to determine together with you what all we can do together. So as a first step, we will outline some of the things that we have been doing. So in this context, it's really important for UNCDF to be more ambitious, more aspirational, and scale up our support to the LDCs. So in this context, in the coming years, we will transition UNCDF to become not only a hybrid development agency, but also a development finance agency. And you'll see some of our tools and instruments already refer to that fact. So we not only serve a development agenda, perhaps more from our grants and TAs, but we also serve as a development finance agency for the LDCs through our loans and guarantees and blended funds. So we have an integrated approach. We start with policy, technical assistance, but then bring in catalytic financing and financial advisory. As you may be familiar, our work focuses around inclusive digital economies as one strong pillar, and digital finance, along with the subnational development finance and infrastructure investments at a municipal level. Both of these operational areas form core pillars of our delivery. This will help strengthen the enabling environment, public and private capacity, and domestic market ecosystems in the LDCs, allowing them to attract investments that can benefit the last mile and the SDGs in their countries. To increase our work on mobilizing and providing finance to the LDCs, we will focus on the top two priorities that will be discussed today and further on. First, we will establish UNCDF firmly as a core, aspirationally, the flagship financing agency for the LDCs within the larger UN system. But this means that we need to fully fund our emerging and future financing facilities and funds. To enhance our own ability to provide these catalytic loans and guarantees, we want to today discuss the capitalization of the UNCDF Bridge Facility. This facility needs about $50 million of grant finance that will be used to make loans and guarantees to the LDCs. And we believe this would be very catalytic, very significant, and we do want to put all our efforts into this fundraise. Properly resourced, this bridge facility can be a dedicated financing facility for the LDCs. The bridge facility will provide flexible finance to de-risk, and it will help attract other commercial and semi-commercial resources from the private sector and development finance institutions. And the reason that will be is because of the nature of the instruments. When you deploy loans and guarantees, you're certifying the maturity of the local domestic capital markets. To expand our role as a facilitator of finance and also as a member of a party that manages third-party blended funds, we have established 2 such funds. And this includes, as you know, the 250 million return-seeking investment capital for the build facility, the build fund that Ambassador Ligoya just referenced. And this primarily invests in SMEs. Further, as you know, we have a euro 350 million fund called the International Municipal Investment Fund for infrastructure and other municipal investments in collaboration with a global infrastructure fund manager called Meridium. So we have these 2 blended funds that have already been examples of some of our blended finance partnerships. We are also positioning UNCDF to be more strategic in the wider UN development system as a go-to provider of financial expertise, instruments, and solutions, so that we can work with other UN entities to deliver more to the LDCs. We are consolidating and scaling our support to countries by developing these country investment pipelines. So when we look at countries, our focus is really on the shovel-ready projects, as we call it. So we financially support such companies, such projects with those grants and TAs, then take them more towards the commercial investment. We constantly hear from investors and other groups about the lack of projects, but we don't believe that that is so. And UNCDF, along with the partnership with the governments and the LDCs, can provide these pipelines to potential investors. So we will call for this pipeline readiness in the LDC5 program of action to support financeable projects in the LDCs. My colleagues will now go into much greater detail about the investment continuum approach that we like to call our work. It starts from the grant and TA, but then goes on to the loans and guarantees, to the bridge facility, and to the build, and to the IMF. And we will use these to provide catalytic support in your countries. And we really look forward to hearing from you on the LDC priorities and bringing both sides together in terms of the priorities, the pipelines on one side, and the financing on our balance sheet and off our balance sheet to help you grow and support your citizens more. So thank you very much, and back to Esther.
Thank you very much, Preeti. So now we'll turn to our colleagues from UNCDF to explain exactly how our theory of change, our mechanisms, and these financing facility tools work. So I'm very pleased to introduce Charulata Singhal and Oman Upoma Ulaya from our Least Developed Countries Investment Platform team. Ladies, over to you.
Thank you, Esther. Greetings, everyone. My name is Oman. I work as an investment specialist at UNCDF in Rwanda. Again, I just want to greet the Executive Secretary, the Ambassador, USG, and members of both the public and the private sector. Thank you so much for attending today's event. And my colleague and I will take you through the bridge facility. If I can have the presentation on the screen, please. Great, thank you. So the bridge facility is a dedicated financing facility that is aimed or targeted to support least developed countries. Next slide, please. So I'll start out very briefly just to give some background context on where we are identifying the problems today. Currently, there is a key financing shortfall experienced by least developed countries, which has hindered their ability to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, there's been a lot of statistics, or rather research study that has been done in the past, and the research has been able to quantify where these needs are today. One or two of them that I would like to highlight is that the need for SDG positive investment in LDCs is estimated at about $240 billion annually. And if you take it back to 2014, just about $40 billion was actually deployed, towards this SDG positive investments. Furthermore, between 2012 and 2018, just a small fraction of about 6% from private finance was mobilized by ODA. So this is just to give you a little bit of a background context around where these shortfalls are in the LDCs. Now, there are two key areas of intervention. Sorry, Laura, could you take it back to the previous slide? Thank you. So there are two key areas of intervention I just want to highlight, which is SME finance and municipal finance. For SME finance, two things I would highlight is that in developing countries, and that's referring to former SMEs, unmet credit needs is estimated at $4.5 trillion. Now, when you zoom into the LDCs, you'll be able to identify that the issues faced by the LDCs are even more acute, because 35% of SMEs in the LDCs have identified that access to finance remains a huge constraint to business growth. For municipal finance, most of the lack of finance in terms of municipal finance is really causing a lot of challenges around the ability to generate projects that can support strong revenue on the municipal level. Next slide, please. Now, I'll just like to spend a minute or two on this slide because it really gives an introduction to why we're having this presentation today. And this slide really discusses the development finance architecture, which aims to address the financing shortfall, which I have referenced in my previous slide in terms of statistics. Now, in this graph, you see two axes. You have the y-axis, which is really demonstrating the level of risk in terms of businesses from high risk to low risk. And then on the x-axis, Laura, if you could zoom out a bit so we can see the x-axis. Laura?
Oman, I'm not sure we can do that, so please just continue the presentation.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so for the x-axis, we have split the levels or the stage of businesses from early stage to mature businesses. Now, I'll start from the right. So on the right side of the graph is where you have the mature businesses. So these are businesses that are at least 3 to 5 years old. They've obtained some form of financing in the past, and they've demonstrated strong revenue. And most importantly, these businesses are more low risk business. And so businesses that are more mature, as you know, would be able to attract commercial finance from commercial banks and large investment funds on their own. Now, when you move from the right side, which is the very end of the right side of the x-axis, which is the mature stage businesses, the next stage is the businesses that we consider are at their expansion stage. And these businesses on their own, they are high risk, identified at high risk businesses on their own. And they are businesses that have been operational for a few number of years also. And they're businesses at this stage that are able to attract financing from DFIs and multilateral development banks, including impact investors. Now, when you get to the left side of the graph on the x-axis, you have the businesses that are identified as startups or seed businesses. Now, these companies on their own are very much high risk, and these companies on their own are not able to access finance from development finance institutions or from the commercial banks. So what happens is that most of the businesses and the startups, what they do is that they're able to obtain funding from through grants. And UNCDF on its own, along with other UN agencies, are able to provide or support these businesses with grant funding. And one of the ways we also do this is through the various challenge funds that we have today within the organization. Now, with that in mind, there's a gap. So there's a gap between grant funding on the left side of the graph and development finance / commercial finance on the right side of the graph. Now, the gap in between is actually the financing shortfall that we identified. So it's the reason why we're here today. It's where we envisage that the bridge facility will be able to support such businesses. Now, these businesses are more identified or termed as early stage businesses. They're companies that are not able to access finance from the commercial banks or from development finance, but they are also businesses that have obtained grants in the past. And so they're businesses that are looking for that next level of financing. And so they require some form of concessional finance in terms of concessional loans or guarantees. So this is where the bridge facility, we hope will be able to close that gap. Next slide, please. Now, just before I hand it over to my colleague, UNCDF, through its resolution 2186 from 1966, has a unique mandate to support businesses using concessional loans and guarantees on their own balance sheets. And this is what the bridge facility will address. And one of the ways we do this is really to support businesses across all the UN agencies or UN development system by providing concessional loans and guarantees. Over to you, Shara. Thank you.
Thank you, Oman. Laura, if we could move to the next slide. Thank you very much. So UNCDF's approach to investment finance is to very smartly use its scarce concessional resources to attract more private finance for the achievement of the SDGs. Everything that UNCDF does in this realm of investment finance is aimed at moving the needle on how capital, especially private commercial capital, flows into the least developed countries. Our overarching goal is to increase this amount of capital, whether it's domestic or international, directed at supporting projects, companies, or municipalities in last mile environments. Over the years, what we found is that blended finance can be a very powerful tool to achieve this goal, even if blended finance, as we know, cannot be considered as a single silver bullet to achieve the financing of all SDGs. So UNCDF has therefore adopted a two-pronged approach towards achieving this goal. On the one hand, using its own balance sheet to take on more risks and create demonstration effects, the box that you see in yellow, and on the other, to scale up what works by partnering with third-party managed investment vehicles. Preeti has already alluded to these in the form of the Build Fund and the IMF Fund. Next slide, please, Laura. So you're seeing the same visual that Oman explained earlier, where we're seeing that on one hand, we have commercial finance through commercial banks, etc., who take low to medium middle risk. They don't want to go into very high risks. Then we have development finance actors who are still in the, let's say, mid-risk range. They're not so much in the low risk, and also are willing to work with entities which are not fully mature. We have impact financiers who provide financing for slightly higher risk, but again, as well as slightly more towards early stage companies. And then of course, we have member states and philanthropic organizations providing grant funding, taking on high risk and providing funding to seed projects. And there is this gap, right? So Laura, if you could please click this gap. This stark gap in the development finance architecture needs to be addressed. And UNCDF's bridge facility is a dedicated financing facility for the LDCs, which we believe can help fill this gap. Bridge is a ready-made offtake mechanism. It's dynamic, and we can offer flexible support to SMEs, financial service providers, or municipal projects without a one-size-fits-all approach. I'd be happy to explain more of that in the future slides. Laura, if you could move on, thank you. So this is what Preeti referred to as the continuum. UNCDF actually developed this investment architecture, which we like to call the investment continuum, which aims at supporting companies and projects at any stage of their development, from startup till the time they mature. So as we move from left to the right-hand side of the screen, and also to drive additional private finance at any stage of this process. Now, the bridge facility is a part of this investment continuum, as I said, for SMEs, for financial service providers, as well as for municipal projects in LDCs. So it really looks at serving the entire spectrum types of companies and projects that need financing. If we move our eyes towards the left-hand side of the graph, it all starts with UNCDF's ability, either directly or through the wider UN system, to identify promising companies and investment opportunities by leveraging our programmatic efforts and activities and boots on the ground. Something private impact investors or financiers seldom have or can even afford. At their very early stage, we can provide these companies with some seed grants, as you see in the yellow box on the top left. And we can play the role that family, friends, or sometimes even angel investors play in other environments. Now, as these companies grow, they start generating revenues and cash flows. We find that their financing needs become too large to be fulfilled by microfinance institutions, and still it's too small to be considered favorably by commercial banks or investors. This, I think, as someone mentioned before me, is the classic missing middle death valley that several companies find themselves in, which deters their further growth. At this stage, we can provide them with concessional loans from our balance sheet via the bridge facility so that they can start building track record and credit history while strengthening their balance sheets. Or we can also provide concessional guarantees, which might deliver that de-risking support needed to encourage commercial banks or investors to provide finance. Private investors are therefore invited to co-invest at any stage of the process. Now, as these companies keep growing and we start moving from the left to the right-hand side of the slide, their capital needs also change as they mature, but they may not yet be fully ripe to receive pure commercial capital. And this is where the blended finance vehicles like the Build Fund or the IMF Fund come in, which we have launched together with third-party fund managers. And they could play a very important role in providing larger amounts of capital on a semi-commercial basis to these SMEs and municipal projects. At the end of the journey, of course, what we hope is that some of these companies will be mature enough, will have sufficient track record, and will be considered fully bankable to be able to access pure commercial finance on their own. By showing to private investors that these companies can indeed be good investees, they can pay their dues on time and generate financial returns. What we are trying to showcase and what we want to showcase is through our demonstration effects, the viability of investing in LDCs for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we hope that over time, UNCDF's financial intervention would actually not be needed anymore, as we would have successfully filled the gap. That's how we would measure our success, in that we don't need UNCDF to play this role at all. And finally, I think just to circle things up, that by adopting this incremental bottom-up approach, we intend to drive systemic change as the demonstration effects feed into policy choices made by governments and also the investment decisions made by financiers. Next slide, please, Laura. This slide really shows that the UNCDF bridge facility and our investment continuum can also serve the rest of the UNDS with sourcing and technical assistance provided by UNDS agencies, and also potentially grants being provided by them. Next slide, please, Laura. We're trying here to explain the key features of the bridge facility, which is important in the whole reason for this dialogue today. So allow me to spend a minute to go through this. In terms of the facility size, the initial capitalization of 50 million is being targeted with possible future replenishments. The funding, since the funding comes to UNCDF on our own balance sheet, we can only accept grant funding from donors, which could be member states, philanthropies, or foundations. And the investment instruments, like we've explained, could be loans of various types or guarantees, and for deal sizes that favor the missing middle. So anywhere between, let's say, $100,000 to $1 million. The geographic focus continues to be on the 46 LDCs, with loans and guarantees being provided both in local currencies as well as hard currencies. The sector focus for us continues to be the thematic focus areas of interest for UNCDF, which is food security, nutrition, financial inclusion and digital innovation, green economy, local public infrastructure, blue economy, and focusing on women and youth's economic empowerment. Throughout this whole endeavor, UNCDF will adhere to the key principles of making sure that there is no risk of market distortion, that we contribute to market development, there is minimum concessionality, and there is always an added additionality, while always adhering to UNCDF strategic framework. And of course, prospects, as I said earlier, could be SMEs, they could be financial service providers, municipalities, public-private partnerships, or in SPVs as well. Next slide, please, Laura. All right, here I think what we're just trying to say that as we just described, the bridge facility can only take in grant funding to provide revolving financial instruments like loans and guarantees. We are very grateful for the anchor support of these donors, SIDA, NORAD, COICA, FMO, and Liechtenstein, who early on recognized the potential of the bridge facility and graciously provided funding to us to commence work on this basis. Next slide, please, Laura. All right, this is just a snapshot of a few recent transactions that were undertaken from the bridge facility. They span all our thematic focus areas and showcase that all the transactions are small ticket sizes, indeed, all less than $300,000. So since the proof of the pudding is in the eating, we'd also like to take this opportunity to take you through 2 case studies of existing and maybe upcoming investments through the bridge facility. With that, Laura, fantastic. Thank you for coming onto this slide. Aptec, this is an existing investment. Aptec is a local Ugandan company that was established by 2 Eritrean brothers who arrived in Uganda as refugees. Now, this company operates in the renewable energy space and provides off-grid solar irrigation and power generation solutions. When UNCDF started working with Aptec with grants, no bank was willing to finance this business. The company was new. They had no collateral to offer and had only a limited track record. Excuse me. So UNCDF became the first lender of record with a $250,000 loan. Despite the disruption related to the COVID pandemic, Aptec has proved to be an impeccable borrower and has continued to grow their business. And 2 years down the line, UNCDF's initial loan was repaid in full. Laura, if you could please click. On the back of the positive credit history built by Aptec and a more solid balance sheet, Stanbic Bank, which is also here joining us, decided to provide a $1.1 million credit facility to the company. And additionally, the Build Fund is considering complementing this working capital facility with longer term capital financing facility of around $300,000. And this is how, this is the kind of success. Laura, if you could move on to the next slide. All right, so as you can see, the leverage achieved so far was almost 4 times. This is the kind of success story that UNCDF strives to achieve. We were highly catalytic. We filled a gap where no one else wanted to come in. And now the private sector can take over. This is how the targeted usage of concessional finance can drive the mobilization of private commercial finance. I'll pass the baton back to my colleague Oman to discuss Kombeza. Over to you, Oman.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, so I'll take you through briefly through Green Mountain. Green Mountain is a coffee producer and exporter based in Rwanda, and this company was sourced from UN Women in Rwanda. It's a female-owned business by a Rwandan, and the company has been operational for close to about 8 years. Prior to the introduction of Green Mountain to UNCDF, the company benefited from technical assistance support from UN Women through Rwanda Chamber Women Entrepreneurs, especially during the advent of the COVID crisis. Currently, the company is seeking additional financing for further CapEx investment to enable the company process more cherry coffee into green coffee that will be ready for exports. The company is seeking debt financing of about $400,000 over a 4-year loan tenor. And we envisage that the financing will be an equal split between UNCDF's bridge facility and an international impact investor that has indicated strong interest to support the business objective. Now, the debt financing will help Green Mountain increase its processing capacity ready for export and be able to, in the near future, attract commercial investors for additional financing. The company will also support women who are mostly cherry coffee farmers and will also work in a coffee processing factory to help create more jobs and reduce poverty. We also have one of our colleagues from UN Women in Rwanda that will also speak more about the opportunities in Rwanda during the panel discussion. Thank you very much, and over to you, Esther.
Thank you very much, Charu and Oman. One of the things that we really appreciate about UNCDF is that we are doing work exactly at the coalface of this type of development finance. You'll attend and hear a lot of UN events where people talk about the need to attract private sector capital, but our colleagues have just broken down for you exactly how we do it with specific examples of small and medium enterprises in least developed countries, which is unusual and one aspect of our work that we're very proud of. So now we'll move to our expert panel discussion. We have a great lineup today. For our first speaker, we'll go to Dingase Chirwa of Kombeza Foods. She was one of the participants of a UNDP Growth Accelerator Lab program in Malawi and actually received a concessional loan from UNCDF in Malawi. So Dingi, could you please tell us about your business and your experience with both UNDP and UNCDF?
Thank you very much, Esther, for the introduction. So my name is Dingase Chirwa. I am the founder and the managing director of Kombeza Foods. Kombeza Foods started late 2017, but officially registered in January of 2018. In the same year, there was a call by UNDP and the Royal Norwegian Embassy for a program called Growth Accelerator, where we had to apply to get a grant to accelerate our businesses. So we applied for the grant and got the grant. It was worth $40,000. It was a matching grant, and we had to add 30% of our own funds for the grant as well. So when we got the grant, it came with trainings, which we attended. There were different labs. I think there were 6 labs. And those labs were so eye-opening and really helped us as a business. Simply because, I'll give an example. When we got news that we got the grant, we intended to buy small equipment and build a small factory to house that equipment. So we wanted to buy equipment that would enable us to produce 400 liters a day initially. But after going through those labs and realizing the potential that we had, and after analyzing our finances, we realized that our business actually had potential. So we decided to use the entire $40,000 to build a bigger factory that would enable us to increase our processing and our production to at least 5,000 liters. So that money was really useful, and we built our factory. And the next step was for us to get additional financing in order to get the suitable equipment in order for us to process effectively and efficiently and the quality that we wanted. So we started looking for additional financing. Obviously, we went to our commercial banks first, and we also went to a development bank locally. But what was prohibitive was the interest rates, and B, we didn't have the actual collateral to support our loan. So we're looking for over $200,000, but the collateral being young and not having anything, we couldn't afford anything. So we were told to look for other collateral, which we weren't able to do. And at that point, UNCDF came in to say, we saw the opportunity and we started discussing and providing information that we needed to provide so that we could actually get this concessional loan. So we have the loan, and the loan will enable us to start producing at least 5,000 liters a day. It's very exciting for us, being a female-led business, being a startup. It's really given us hope for something that we didn't have hope for. To grow organically could have probably taken us at least 3 to 5 years to get to the level that we wanted to. And, with that slow process, your employees start to lose hope, your farmers start to lose hope, and you also start to lose hope because the momentum eventually drops. So this concession alone has really come on time. And what I really like is the flexibility in terms of the repayments. So what we're used to is, monthly repayments, but we've got a 12-month moratorium, and also our payments are structured in such a way that it doesn't put too much pressure on us. So, we've opted for the biannual payments, that gives us time, like from now we've gotten the money, we're now paying our suppliers to provide us with the equipment. It will take a bit of time for the equipment to come in, for us to start producing. So, the flexibility there is really, really helpful, and it's something that we're really appreciative about. What UNDP Malawi has also done is to support us, and they've been really there for us because they're the ones who identified the opportunity and told us. So from word go, from the time that we got the grant, they really followed up on us. So they followed up on what we're doing, what challenges we're meeting, where we are. And so we're able to explain to them that, look, you gave us the money. Yes, we've built a factory, but we don't have equipment. So it would be very difficult for us to now move on to the next. And looking at what has already been presented, that's a huge gap that is always a problem to fill. So you have step A, but for you to move to C is always a challenge, and you really need the right type of help in order for you to get to C and then eventually get to D, where we'll be able to now get our own commercial loans because we have a proven track record and we've achieved the collateral that we needed. So in brief, that's where I'll end my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dingasi. We're so happy to hear your story, and we'll definitely come back to you to hear more about your great business. Can you just tell us, Kombeza, what kind of product does it produce? Is it milk or juice or?
Oh, sorry, I didn't explain that. So we're a dairy processing business. We were only doing drinking yogurt, so packaged in about 7 different flavors. So with this equipment, we'll now be doing more products. Specifically, we'll be doing the drinking yogurt, we'll be doing the eating yogurt. So that's the yogurt in the small cups, the spoonable yogurt. We'll be using real fruits. So instead of the artificial flavors and colorings, we want to introduce the real fruit yogurt. So using real strawberries, using real mango, using real pineapple. It's something that is not locally done at the moment. We will do fresh cream, we'll do butter, and we'll package fresh milk in packets. So this is something different, and it's something that we think is more exciting. And looking at on the health trajectory that the world is going to, I think it's something that Malawi will come to enjoy and appreciate as a nation. So that's what we do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And we'll definitely come back to you for the questions. So now we'll turn to Christopher Onagen from the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA. Chris, are you with us?
Absolutely, eventually.
Oh, great.
Thank you so much, Laura. And
we're so glad
Abhishek.
Great.
Thank you.
So Chris, SIDA is, of course, UNCDF's biggest and most creative and most loyal donor. So thank you so much for that. Your support has been critical to this whole story of innovative work that we've heard today. So please tell us, SIDA was one of the first donors to provide actually the official development assistance that we were able to use for this bridge facility to make loans like the one that Dingase was just talking about. Why did SIDA decide to do that? And can you please share with us why, from a donor perspective, this is a good way to use your official development assistance funding?
Well, thank you, first of all, for those kind words. I mean, we've been partners with the UNCDF for many years, for well, at least 15 years or so. That was long before I joined SIDA. But so I think part of the reason why we want to continue support to the UNCDF mission is that, you know, we put a lot of emphasis on pro-poor work and trying to use blended finance, mobilized capital to that end, and we ourselves have been working with guarantees, although unfunded guarantees, for the past 10 years or so. So when we see an opportunity to engage further with UNCDF in the LDC investment platform, and also we had some of our staff has been also instrumental in developing that, specifically Mr. Anders Berlin is heading that facility. So we saw a great opportunity to support that effort, and I think it's super important to leverage, as you can do with your network of not only people in New York and Geneva, but actually the whole sort of family of UN agencies, specifically also in the field. So we appreciate that, and that's basically also, I think, part of the reason why we wanted to continue the support.
So Chris, we know SIDA gives quite a lot of development assistance at the country level. How hard would it be for the embassy in Malawi to find Dingase without the participation of the UN? And what does the UN multilateral system bring to Sweden's assistance efforts to support local entrepreneurs like Dingase?
Well, are we talking? Do you mean specifically Malawi, or generally?
As an example, for your embassy in the field should be providing this assistance.
Well, I think the UN plays a great role in the whole sort of system of development assistance, and I think again the broad sort of and the big toolbox of the different UN agencies, and now more and more I see from your side with the bridge facility, the build fund that we're also, Sharu, I was mentioning, we're looking at opportunities to possibly engage in a first loss tranche with our guarantees. So we see that there is a lot of sort of synergies for us to continue working together with UNCDF. So I think it's super important. And I think just to mention specifically a few things, I think it's super important in the LDC context. I think, finding ways specifically to actually address the big problems of high costs and maybe higher risks. And when I say high costs, it's about everything along the value chain in creating a business, including the funding and financing side. It's important to find ways to maybe leverage technology, to make use of local field officers, using maybe aggregation methodologies in different ways. So I think it's I think it's something, we're filling a big gap there, smaller ticket sizes, and really finding ways to to address the actual obstacles for making this work.
Great, thank you so much. And we can't stress enough from the UN side that it's the creativity and flexibility of donors like SIDA to allow their money to be used in new ways that allows us to innovate these new methods for reaching entrepreneurs like Dingase. So now we'll turn to Brian Tahinduka of Standard Bank of South Africa. Brian, are you with us?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you, Brian. Yes, that's better. Fantastic. So Brian, we understand that you're now with Standard Bank in South Africa, but you used to work at Stanbic Bank in Uganda, and you played a very key role in a UNCDF transaction there. I wonder if you could please tell us about it.
Thank you very much. Once again, a very good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to our panelists and everyone on this discussion. So the transaction we did was a true definition or a demonstration of a public and private sector participation in form of partnership and collaboration. So I was the senior manager looking after renewables then and power and infrastructure, and the client. And we set up a cohort through our business incubator to do training and capacity building for the renewable energy cohort. And one of the customers that was in that training was able to be investor ready because we took through training on business acumen, financials, and many other skills they needed to survive as an SME. And UNCDF was able to come in and provide the first seed financing that was a little bit concessional. And then later, as the client's business grew and he was expanding across the region with different projects in different countries, we were able to come in and provide more capital that was required from an operational and capital investment perspective.
Fantastic. And if I could ask you, Brian, to please increase the volume on your computer and then try to speak a little bit closer to the microphone. We can hear you, but it's quite faint. So just to summarize for the audience, maybe people who had trouble hearing, you were talking about an enterprise that you wanted to support in Uganda, but it was too small and too risky for the bank. That UNCDF came in and did a concessional loan to that enterprise, which is, I believe, Aptec. And then you were able to follow on after that, after Aptec had proven its creditworthiness. So without UNCDF, would you have made that loan at all?
So there were challenges within the books of and we're talking about the audit financials for the client, and with UNCDF coming in, it gave it more cushion to provide basis for more financing on our side. One, number two, when we have had also.
I think we're having some technical problems with Brian, so we'll come back to him hopefully when the connection's a little bit stronger. Okay, so now we'll turn to the last speaker on our panel, Jean de Dieu Nchai Senga from UN Women in Rwanda. Jean, we understand that you were very involved in this interesting transaction with UNCDF and UN in Rwanda. Oh, Brian, you're back. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Okay, I think let me change my connection. I can come in later.
Great, thank you. We'll come back to you if we get a stronger connection. Great. So Jean, if we turn to you, can you please tell us about your collaboration with UNCDF in Rwanda?
Yeah, thank you, Esther, and thank you for this great opportunity. So I'm Jean de Dieu Nchai Senga. I'm Program Officer for Women Economic Empowerment at UN Women here in Rwanda. So the most thing that we are doing as UN Women, we are just promoting the gender equality and women empowerment. So the most thing that we'll be telling you will be around the women. The journey with UNCDF came in during the COVID-19. That's when most of women entrepreneurs and women-owned small and medium enterprises were having many challenges, which exacerbated their mindset, as well as also affecting their businesses. So that's when we started our journey. And we started, of course, through a kind of collaboration and having a kind of discussion to see how we can synergize our activity that we are doing around the women entrepreneurs, as well as also UNCDF. And then we are having, we found that we do have many women that we are working with through the capacity building, through business management, financial literacy, and the other thing that is really focusing on the financial services, as well as also providing the small startup capital for women businesses. And then we found that we're still having some gaps, and then we find that we can work together to address most of the challenges that women-led entrepreneurs were having, like the issue of capital for investment, the working capital, the issue of financial literacy, the issue of just building trustable and viable records for financial services. And then afterward, we come up with a roadmap where we select at least 30 women-led business companies here in Rwanda in different sectors, including the agriculture, including services, including transport, including other sectors. And then we come up with at least 30 sampled business companies of women-led. And then we started just having a kind of analysis in partnership with UNCDF and UN Women. We went through doing the business analysis, looking the profile of what they are doing, the profitability, and other things, looking at their strengths, their weaknesses, and even the gaps. And then afterward, we come up also among 30, we sampled at least five to go for further step of just accessing concessional loans. And then afterward, we had also another meeting with women-led representative and their finances. And we had a kind of discussion, just telling them, we are doing this, we have done this, you have done this, and we have also another opportunity of collaborating and working with UNCDF, especially on the finance side, as well as also on technical assistance. And then we go into further discussion, as well as also building a kind of rapport. And then afterward, that's when we started also additional analysis one by one. And then also UNCDF organized a kind of courtoisie visit to understand their businesses and know more about what they are doing, and how also they will continuously working to scale up their businesses. And then that's why we come up with this great opportunity of supporting Green Mountain Coffee. So as Oman presented, it was really a good example. That is the starting. So the need, they are still there. And we found that together with UNCDF, we can reach more and finance more businesses for the women, so that they can reach to another level of businesses. Coming back to the example Oman provided with these company-ready businesses, we found that this Green Mountain Coffee is really impacting a big number of people. They are employing even more than 1,000 employees. They can continuously supporting them even to increase their coffee productivity, as well as also adding value to their coffee and increase their income and revenues, and they are able also to continuously using this concessional loan, as well as also impacting others. So maybe toward the end, I can just agree that UNCDF can continuously collaborating with other UN agents, as they are also having different intervention that are looking into businesses, and they are still having many challenges. Most of them, they are focusing on the capacity building in terms of building their capacity in terms of technical skills like business plan development, financial services, capacity building, financial literacy, and the other things. So what if we can work together, we can reach to the greater impact and also building this gap of financial services, especially for those who are experiencing a kind of gaps in financing. That's what I can say at the moment, and we really appreciate the great partnership, and we hope so this partnership will reach far and reach too many women-ready companies so that they can reach to the next level of their businesses and impact as many as possible. Thank you, over.
Thank you so much, Jean. We really appreciate our collaboration with you as well in Rwanda, and thank you for the wonderful cooperation. So now we have some questions from the audience. I'd like to ask our colleague Charu to take the first one, which is, are all LDCs eligible for the bridge facility? And how do you ensure that the fund is truly innovative and serves underserved communities? This is from Makeda Segaye. Charu, over to you.
Thanks, Esther. So the bridge facility is open to financing entities and projects from all the 46 LDCs with which we work. And in terms of, I'm sorry, I missed the second part of the question, Esther.
How do we ensure that it reaches underserved communities?
Right. So in terms of ensuring the reach, our programmatic teams who work in country conduct extensive screens of the market and, have these challenge funds and open competitions wherein entities are invited to participate. So if SMEs are invited to participate, much like how Ms. Chirwa said, she was invited to participate in a call for proposals. She submitted her application, and based on the criteria of the call for proposal, then she was selected. That's pretty much how it would work. So it's an open competition, open to all from that region, or from the set, specific verticals or thematic focus areas if we're looking to focus at.
Thank you so much, Charu. And I think you've also addressed the question from Lionel Mbanga about what are the selection mechanisms or projects. So as our colleague Charu said, there is usually an open call for proposals. Anyone can apply, and then our colleagues will assess the entities that are applying. So here's a question from Foyasal Khan from Bangladesh about vaccine financing. That's a little bit outside the scope of this panel, but I wonder, Chris Onagen, if you could talk a little bit about CEDA and what CEDA is doing on vaccine financing.
Sure. I might not be the expert on that particular field, but I know that we've done a number of funding to different programs in different, bilaterally in different countries. We have not specifically worked with guarantees in the areas of vaccines, but we've been involved in some facilities where they can, not only focusing on vaccine, but health in general. So we're definitely trying to address different health sort of challenges that comes along. And I mean, vaccine is obviously one super important thing, but we have a number of perhaps more general access to health issues. We've done a few guarantees with commercial banks in Uganda, for example, where we've created these loan portfolio guarantees, unfunded guarantees, but supporting local commercial banks to push them to lend more specifically to clinics, to different forms of health facilities, to increase access to healthcare, and not only in the cities, but also more specifically on the country countryside and rural areas and targeting the underserved people in those areas where it's difficult to get access to healthcare in general.
Thanks very much, Chris. So Preeti, I'm going to come to you with this question. This is more of a philosophical question from Mato Anthony Shah about trade and what is the best financing strategy to attack poverty effectively. Would you like to take this question?
Sure, Esther. And I mean, there could be several answers to that, but let's say one that we really believe in and we work on is the entrepreneurship, right? We feel that in each country, of course, supported by good governance, as represented here by several ambassadors, that in the end, the economy will be, productive, people will have jobs, products will be created. It really depends on the entrepreneurship. And so one of the key items for us at UNCDF is really supporting that innovation, innovative entrepreneurs. And I think that's what we've heard today. And I'd really like to call attention to this fact, especially in this, let's say, COVID and hopefully post-COVID era soon, that there should be like a great reset of the capital markets, the way global capital thinks about development. And we really think that the growth and emergence of these entrepreneurs on the ground in the emerging markets is where the key lies to global prosperity. COVID and other, these horrible impacts have shown that there should be a one humanity, one planet approach. And we want to ensure, the SDGs, basic standard of living for all. But we want to do it in a way for CDF as a capital development fund that it's a win-win for all. So we're telling capital, look, the capital that can do grants, that's great and appreciated. But this conversation in particular is, there can be great returns from the emerging, from the LDCs and, great entrepreneurs represented here. So one of our efforts, there's a program going in within CDF. It's at the initial concept stage of SDG-500. We'd like to identify, all of the entrepreneurs and the LDCs, but sort of help them and help incubate them and grow them. And then eventually even, identify the 500 as opposed to the Fortune 500 of the largest, US companies. So in that way, we really feel we want to see the emergence of great entrepreneurs and great companies from the LDCs, and we'll be there in that journey. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Preeti. Jagdeep has a question directly for Chris. So Chris, please take a look at that question about CETA. And then thank you, Greg, for saying that the bridge instrument looks like is amazing and filling several gaps in development finance. Is there a likely possibility to raise more than $50 million? What is the appetite of donor agencies to finance such a creative instrument with a clear track record of results and success? We hope so. We'll start with the 50 million and then go from there. So now I believe Brian is back with us. Brian, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, Brian.
Yes.
We see you beautifully. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. So I just had a quick question for you, Brian, which was in Uganda, you were able to make the loan because UNCDF came in with this concessional piece. Has anything changed in the situation either in Uganda or South Africa where the bank is more willing to make similar loans to similar entrepreneurs, or will you always need the concessional piece before you come in?
So as a bank, and I will speak to specific to Stanbic Bank Uganda, what happened is during the March to May window last year, when COVID, the pandemic hit the country, what we discovered was the commercial debt would not actually come in to support most of the SMEs that were suffering with the COVID-related challenges. So what we did was to go out and set up a fund. And I was lucky enough, I was given the opportunity to set up the Economic Enterprise Restart Fund. And we had the UN, the whole UN body as a partner on that fund. And what we're looking for is to attract different investors. And I see an opportunity here for UNCDF to come in and say, how do we provide more access, more funding into this kind of fund? And what we're doing is we gave it 3 strategic pillars. The first one is technical support in terms of training and capacity building, as we get them from the beginning, the early stage, into the missing middle as they get ready for commercial dates. Then the other piece was to help them digitize for financial inclusion. And again, UNCDF came strong and supported us on the digitization agenda. And then now we're looking at how do we now support these businesses with capital to actually be able to run and survive and refocus their businesses. So this is an opportunity for UNCDF to come in again and say, we can actually provide funding in this kind of intervention. And for us as a bank, what we do is to support on scale, reaching out to as many districts and many customers as you can. Then the other piece also is the collaboration we've done with the Swedish International Development Agency, where we have looked at a guarantee that can be focused into the renewable energy space. And it's a de-risking instrument that we are using at the back of capital to lend to SMEs. And what this does is to help us get more SMEs into the financial wallet as we focus on different ecosystems. So impact on access to clean energy, you have direct impact on education, you have direct impact on employment, direct impact on health, and then you have the gender and women. So what we've done is to say, what is the UN and UNCDF and other related parties, what are their key strategic objectives, and how do we benchmark also while we're looking at our strategic objectives as commercial bank, and make sure that we sync both in the middle and we have that meeting middle and we collaborate and partner more. So this is a great opportunity again to say, how do we partner, how do we collaborate more to actually deliver this need for more funding to SMEs in Uganda and other markets. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brian. For colleagues who couldn't hear, Brian was talking about a facility that Standard Bank has set up that will provide COVID financing that UNCDF will have an opportunity to come in and play the same concessional role that we did in Uganda. So as we wrap up, we wanted to highlight one other example of really innovative finance that our teams are doing in the Gambia, and then we'll have concluding remarks from the ambassador of the Gambia. So for the example, we'll go back to our colleague, Charu.
Excellent. Thanks, thanks Esther, and thanks Laura for sharing the screen. Great. So we talked about a few existing transactions, shifting gears to one which is under implementation. So this is the Gambia Solar Power Plant project, which is a joint UNDP UNCDF project, like I said, currently under implementation. This is a nearly 22 million euro project, of which 10.5 million euros approximately has been received via grants from the NAMA facility, which is a multi-donor facility, and this is to establish 2 grid-connected solar plants of 10.5 megawatts in 2 locations in the Gambia, at Basse and Farafenni, to address the electricity shortage in the country. The project aims to achieve over 322,000 tons of CO2 emission reductions, with 145,000 people approximately gaining an improvement in their quality of life. The challenge in this very important project was to attract private independent power producers, or IPPs, to invest in such solar power plants, something that wasn't done before. To address this challenge, UNCDF will administer a PPA guarantee, or the Power Purchase Agreement guarantee, likely offering around 70% coverage. This PPA guarantee is the core foundation of the project because it de-risks the IPP's investments into the solar power plants, and also is expected to attract funding and financing from external private stakeholders. It would be provided under the bridge facility and would be administered by UNCDF. The tenders for this project are underway, and as I said, we would issue the guarantee after the winning bid is selected. To conclude, I would just like to say that this is a good example of the investment continuum, also at the service of UNDS, since project sourcing and technical assistance here is being provided by UNDP, while UNCDF is leading the financial structuring and the delivery. It also showcases the range of support that the bridge facility aims to provide, not just to companies or to municipalities, but also in these project finance type of transactions which are sourced by other UN agencies. Thank you, Esther. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Charu, and we're very excited about this project in the Gambia. And so that's a fitting transition to our speaker for closing remarks, Ambassador Lang Yabo, the representative of the Gambia to the United Nations. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Esther. I will start by recognizing my brothers. I don't know whether they are still with us. That is USG Courtney and Ambassador Park, as well as the Executive Secretary, Preeti. Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends. It is an honor to join you in this important discussion today at the end. I must state that the excellent presentations on innovative financing, the bridge facility initiative by the UNCDF, invigorates a new momentum in the call to action and charts a new avenue for channeling financing to LDCs. This innovation could not have come at a better time, given the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought about significant shocks, exacerbated vulnerabilities, and reinforced the challenges being faced by LDCs to fulfill their socio-economic aspirations for a better world. Now more than ever, LDCs are in need of a people, planet, and partnership-centered programs, policies, and financing to help them recover and build back better inclusively. From the perspective of a developing country and in view of the preparations for the 5th UN Conference on the LDCs currently underway, we are faced with a unique opportunity to discuss and chart a better way forward. In this regard, it will be important for the international community to commit to concrete actions to support a resilient recovery to make sure the LDCs will make progress on the SDGs in the coming decade. As an LDC itself, the Gambia's preparedness or preparations for the UN 5th Conference on the LDCs coincide with a number of policy milestones geared towards our projected economic upward mobility. First, the presentation of our voluntary national review report on the progress of implementing the SDGs at the 2020 HLPF gave us the opportunity to take stock of the areas where we have made immense progress, notably in addressing climate change and improving access to quality education. Preparation of our VNR also unveiled the gaps that exist in terms of attracting adequate financing and investments to support the full implementation of our National Development Plan, which is in line with the UN SDGs. It is important to highlight that the current LDC5 draft outcome document calls for a dedicated financing mechanism that can deliver catalytic investment capital for MSMEs and small investment projects in the LDCs and graduated countries, including the option for flexible financing to attract additional resources from the private sector in order to leverage SDG-aligned investments to address the needs of the LDCs. On key challenges, we recognize that ODA is a crucial backbone for financing investments for sustainable development in LDCs, yet it seems to be dwindling in this very crucial year of our journey to 2020. Therefore, we are making a number of recommendations. One, to enable LDCs to have access to more financing options, there is a clear need for much more determined efforts by developed countries and development partners to diversify sources of financing, including blended finance and private finance. It is crucial for LDCs to be equipped with the tools and adequate resources to finance our development priorities. And this is what we are articulating as part of our LDC5 process. It is also our strong view that leveraging critical and innovative financing mechanisms in the developing countries requires the full support of not only the UN system, but also strong partnerships with the public and private sectors at the national level. In that regard, UNCDF, with its unique mandate focusing on the LDCs and as a reliable and valid partner, can do the following. One, help facilitate these partnerships to mobilize SDG finance, and two, provide technical assistance and financing that promote an enabling environment for private sector development, including for the MSMEs and sustainable infrastructure. On examples of partnership, the presenter has already alluded to the excellent partnership under the NEMA facility in the Gambia. This facility is embedded in our National Development Plan, and it is expected to contribute to the country's recovery from the COVID-19 by adding to the stabilization of energy supply, especially for businesses. Building on the successful start of this experience, we are pleased to note that UNCDF, together with UNDP, have designated similar joint proposals for the NEMA facility donors to invest in climate change mitigation projects. Given our positive experience working with UNCDF in using its own balance sheet facility of loans and grants, known as the Bridge Facility, we see the potential for a scale-up version of the Bridge Facility. We encourage donors to provide additional support to UNCDF in order for the LDCs to fully capitalize on the Bridge Facility so that this type of innovative and catalytic investment can be provided in all the 46 LDCs. In conclusion, we look forward to engaging with UNCDF and other stakeholders throughout the LDC5 to scale up this type of innovative finance and mobilize much needed investment capital for LDCs. I thank you for the opportunity and I thank you for the invitation as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. We're very happy to partner with you in the Gambia, and we hope to expand that cooperation. So thank you so much, all of our guests, distinguished excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for staying with us through what has been a very engaging discussion. We hope you've enjoyed it. We've heard from our colleagues, our panelists, our distinguished ambassadors that the need is very clear from LDCs for concrete financing solutions that that provide the kind of financing and technical assistance that LDC governments and entrepreneurs have been asking for. We know that LDC economies are characterized by structural vulnerabilities and that our colleagues and friends in the LDCs are the ones most affected by climate change and other shocks, but they have contributed the least to those problems that cause those shocks. They also have the least amount of resources to deal with them when they happen, like the pandemic. We know that the pandemic has had devastating effects on foreign direct investment and ODA flows to LDCs and have in many countries erased much of the progress they've made towards the SDGs and the Paris Agreement, so that assistance is needed now more than ever. We know that donors and governments alike are seeking new and innovative ways to attract additional finance, particularly from the private sector, to development efforts in the LDCs. We know that UN development entities are committed to working together to support a unified approach to solving these problems and leveraging each other's comparative advantages. And we've had great examples of these partnerships today from UN Women and UNDP alongside UNCDF. We know that it's exceptionally challenging to reach the SMEs at the local level in the least developed countries, as you heard from Dingase when she was detailing some of her challenges in accessing finance. So we know that LDC entrepreneurs and governments are asking for concrete solutions. And we know that, as Brian explained, private sector banks and commercial entities are ready to finance businesses like Dingase's if they have the right partners and conditions. So the demand is very clear, and one way to provide it is through UNCDF's Bridge Facility, which you've heard about today. This solution is now piloted, tested, and ready to scale. UNCDF has currently made 27 loans and guarantees in 7 countries, and we would like to expand that to all 46 least developed countries. So please join us to fully fund our Bridge Facility with $50 million to meet the call from LDCs for a dedicated financing facility to fund entrepreneurs like Dingase, support committed leaders like Ambassadors Lagoya and Yabo and Rattray, and to support and serve the LDC communities and help their citizens lift themselves and their families out of poverty. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.